Thanks for coming back for part 2. My show is called Growth Factor because it's all about growing, listening to people like John. And if you'd like to interview as well, I just feel like if we share our story, we all have many ways that we can grow because we're all on a journey. We all have different thoughts and opinions and views and life experience. So I love hearing John's journey. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, then I'm going to continue what we were talking about from part 1. But you can find it just down below in Growth Factor. We're also on Rumble. So there are many places that you can find this show. So this is John Pierce. He's of Oasis Organics, and he does regenerative, that's not an easy word to say, farming. And he's going to teach you, by the way, you could hire him. He'll talk to you through teleconference if you want. He can guide you over the phone or video, or he can come to you anywhere in the world if you want to bring him out to your country or your state. But what we were saying in part 1, I was just going to continue. So I used to work for Merck Pharmaceuticals from about 1992 to 1997. So I was helping launch things like Fosamax for osteoporosis, Vioxx, I think it was for arthritis, Singular for asthma. Mavacor was I believe it was the first cholesterol medication. And we always said it was natural. It came from nature because it came from a mushroom. And we also talked about ivermectin. The company would teach us to say, we're such a great company because we give it out free to third world countries for river blindness. So we were saying this in the early 90s. So I knew it was a medication for human beings. And then recently, in about 2021, 2022, I saw the media saying it was for horses, which it is, but I knew it was for humans as well. And I knew that our company was giving it out for river blindness. So I thought, what an amazing company I work for. So that really affected me. I really believed in medications. I really believe in lowering cholesterol with pills. But if you look at my interview with Dr. Ovadia, and he wrote a book called Stay Off My Operating Table, he says quite the opposite of how I was trained. So I want to talk about that. But also what I was going to say, what I mentioned to John, he said something so divine that came right out of his mouth, and he didn't even know. I was shocked. He mentioned Dr. Rashid, who he also mentioned the word epigenetics. John did in part 1. Now, what was amazing to me was I went to Pasadena, California in May of 2019. Nobody would come with me. I invited everyone. So only my son, he's 21 now, at the time he was 19, would come with me because I basically begged him. The reason I went was Dr. or Professor Bruce Lipton. He, I believe, is the person that coined the term epigenetics. Why was I so attracted to it? Because I come from 3 sisters. So it's a mom and 3 sisters and a father. So there's 5 in our family. 4 of us female. Now, 2 of us have had our breasts removed from breast cancer. Now, you would think we have the BRACA gene. We don't. We don't have the BRACA gene. Both my mom and dad do not. So that means we don't have the gene that caused, what was her name? Angelina Jolie removed her breasts and her ovaries because she felt scared that her genetics mean something. Now I'm listening to Dr., and maybe he's a professor too, Thomas Seyfried, Seyfried. If you can contact him, I want to interview him as well. He talks about genetics is not true when it comes to cancer. It's not true. And Bruce Lipton was saying that. The crazy thing, when I was in Pasadena at this meeting, they were saying, you know, the things people are putting in their arm, they're saying passports for that are coming. You're not going to be able to travel. You're going to be limited because you're going to have to show your papers if you don't put some things in your body. This was May 2019. I thought they were weird. I'm very open and I don't deny people, but I thought this is weird. I don't think that's possible. And they were saying, don't get real ID. It's going to be tied into real ID. So I still haven't gotten real ID because I kind of have PTSD from what they were saying. But lo and behold, 9-10 months later, they were right. So I just couldn't believe it. So when John said epigenetics, and he was asking about, because I was mentioning, here it is, this book that I got at that seminar by the doctor. And John and I were talking about, there's so much good in that book, but he was saying in the book that the reason we don't eat pigs is pigs are way too similar to human beings. Anyway, so I want to get into first, if you don't mind, talking a little bit more about plant versus meat, if you want, or go wherever you want, and then more about regenerative farming.
Well, sure. I think a lot of the benefits people see when they first dive headlong into, say, veganism comes from finally eating plants. Like, there's a lot of medicine that can be had by eating real good, healthy plants. And then if you were to add back to that really high quality meat, if you're up for it, then I think it's really a recipe for health. And by high quality, I would kind of beat that drum forever. It would mean just, you know, something that lived a good life out in basically nature as it should be. But we always see agriculture as it's either we feed the world, or we feed the world and we destroy nature, or we keep nature and nobody gets fed. But it's kind of plain to see this, this earth has been incredibly productive forever. So why is that? Why didn't we starve out without our chemical sprays and this, that, and the other thing? And, absolute states full of corn. And that's because it literally just generates its own nutrients. And that's sort of where we get into. And it's kind of the cutting edge of science is the microbiome. We're just finally understanding what that's like. And you can't just say add 2 good bacteria to your soil and have it function. It's got to be this whole, literally a symphony, but it's called quorum sensing. So you can have bacteria A and bacteria B, and they won't do anything. You know what I mean? They'll go about their own little way. They can only, this guy say, this guy does this, this guy does that. But if we had bacteria C, those dudes are communicating through chemical signals. And then, and that's the best we understand. That's how fresh it is. It's like we say chemical signals, right? And so now we add, bacteria C in there, and suddenly these things can draw nitrogen down out of the atmosphere. They can fight off plant pathogens like diseases of your plants. And what always goes through my head, and that's not to say it's just bacteria, it's fungi and protozoa, the whole 9 yards. It's like a mini Serengeti unfolding under the, but all those same things are happening in our gut. It's maybe a couple different cast and characters, but you have more cells in you that aren't you than that are genetically you. So they got to do something. So if we take, they say they link antibiotics and depression. So you clear out all your beneficial microbes and you've got like a 50% higher chance of getting depressed. Why is that? And that's because they are keeping us functional. And there's this whole gut brain axis. I can't help but tell everyone that will listen that they need to check that out, because they call it our second brain. And there's literally, that's the amount of neurons, something like that's in a cat's brain is in our stomach. So how important is that? How important is the food you put in your body if it's got that many neurons? You got this whole little unit down there, and we don't talk about it. I didn't learn it in college. Like it's interesting. All they taught me in microbiology in college was that I could get sick. You know what I mean? Which is interesting, because some of the same things that, say, if it were to get in a bad wound, if I didn't take care of a wound properly, those things in their natural environment in the soil can pull nitrogen, can literally pull fertilizer out of the air and feed it to your plants. Some of the same species. So it's in this very specific case, it's a bad thing, but most of the time it's like helping life on Earth live. So that's kind of cool. And to see this kind of, I can't help but think of both worlds at the same time. It's like human health is planetary health. And when, not everyone's going to be a farmer and want to go out and do that. And, and I'd love to talk about how you can bring that home. But it's just, who are the only people really, in my opinion, that are going to save our biosphere, our ecosystem as a whole. The only people that are working huge tracts of land are farmers. So like that is, sure, we can make another national park, but if you can get 100 farmers to, do a little bit better by their land, then that's about the same acreage. You know what I mean? It's a huge impact just for little tweaks. You know what I mean? You take one hazardous chemical out, and you just took billions of that chemical out of our environment. Or, it's just fascinating. Or say there's that much more nutrition going in all these people. You see that in like healthcare or sick care all the time, where we treat things downstream. So like if I'm drinking out of this stream right here and it's making me sick, why do I treat the water right here? Why don't I go like, turn off whatever's going on upstream so that the whole river is now flowing clean again? We're treating downstream symptoms instead of just turning off the faucet on the root issue. Like in everything in life, I try to do this in my own little life, but treat the root symptoms, treat the, you're anxious as can be, like, this is for me. Well, stop drinking 3 cups of coffee. Oh, wow, shocker. Like, instead of like blaming my life situation or whatever, that's a silly example, but it just is what it is. But that said, not everyone's going to run out and be a farmer, but we're raised to use, say, Miracle Grow and Roundup and this, that, and the other thing. Don't even get me started. As far as Roundup go, I would say anyone should go check out Dr. Zach Bush on microbiome and Roundup and the whole thing. There's a really good, he's a little more obscure, harder to find on YouTube, but a guy named Dr. Don Huber, and he's the one that like blew open Roundup and glyphosate and really why we are experiencing this wave. Like it's one of the root issues, but of why we have this massive epidemic of autoimmune. And autoimmune is my own body attacking itself. I have family, I have loved ones that go through this in a different way or another, and like I used to have, believe it or not, like terrible acne back in the day. And as soon as I cleaned up my diet, it was like, oh, shocker. That's all I had to do. I gave Walgreens a fortune in like, salicylic acid pads and struggling, but I wasn't treating the root cause. Turn off the toxins upstream, and all of a sudden, and no one's going to be able to, in this crazy world and this crazy food supply, like no one's going to be able to be perfect, but it's just aiming towards that. And I think that's fascinating. So yeah, you had mentioned before, like how could people bring this home to their own house? And like, some people have a little backyard and like say if they wanted to get chickens or whatever, but if they have an HOA, and like I've worked in Florida and that's like the homeland of HOA, it seems like you can't do anything without getting in trouble with them. But there's all these little things you can do, not necessarily raising eggs or whatnot, but even if it's a little planter in a windowsill, if you can have that soil, and you're growing, say, a basil plant, but you're growing it in healthy living soil, maybe you get your good little organic potting mix and you go out to your local park and you want to get as close to nature as possible. I'm blessed to live not far from Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and I like, whenever I can, I just make up excuses in my brain why I need to go, and I just do it, But you can go and say, go to the biggest tree you can find, go to the base of it and say, scoop up just a little bit of that soil there and what you're doing. And then you bring that home to your little basil and you could swish it around in some clear, like say drinking water, unchlorinated, because that chlorine, which there's another rabbit hole to dive down, if it could sterilize what I'm using for what I'd say beneficial inoculant, bringing that good life home to add to my basil, that basil will then uptake that. Ideally, I would have that from the oak tree in a healthy ecosystem, put it on your basil or whatever. And then those living microbes are then going to colonize that whole thing. So then when I say eat that basil, I'm then restoring, it's like reintroducing the wolves to Yellowstone, but on a microscopic level. That's where like I often have to bring it out, like to make it something big, like say you're bringing back in the wolves to the ecosystem, but you are the ecosystem, and they have your best interest in mind because you are their whole world. So we have this terrible idea in our heads where bacteria bad, like repurposing fire trucks to drive down the street and spray stuff it's insane. You remember those videos, the crazy ones at the start of 2020 or whatever, where they're driving around and spraying basically like Lysol like things all over. You know how much more harm than good that is? Like now you have a problem. Oh wow, everyone got sick. Well, yeah, because they inhaled Lysol. But so if you can say restore those beneficial microbes, or even just being out in nature and like swimming in a clean lake or river or something, if you're blessed to do so, or getting away, you're then putting that back in. So like say if however many courses of antibiotics, like I had a tooth go bad or something, say, and I take antibiotics. So that's killing right here, but it's not like it's localized, it's systemic. It's going through my whole body. So it's all gone, and they just say take probiotics or take like a probiotic yogurt. Okay, great. I have 8 species of bacteria I'm bringing back in, right? What about the other 2,600 that were living there before that antibiotic thing? You know, I mean, it's way more than that even. Like, I saw an interesting study and they were comparing people with no pets versus dog people versus cat people. And dog people had the highest beneficial microbiome. So what does that translate into is now I have literally an army that has my best interests in mind, that wants to defend you. Literally, you are their whole little world. So if there's any bad intruders getting in there, you suddenly have the intelligence of nature backing you up, which is pretty cool. You know what I mean? It's like, if that bad bacteria is, say, I don't know, like a feral dog, if you cut it loose in a city, you know, or whatever, it can cause all kinds of havoc. If you were to cut that feral bad dog loose in the Serengeti in a natural functioning ecosystem, how long is that pathogen, that bad bacteria, going to live? It doesn't really have a chance. You know what I mean? It might make it one night before a leopard gets it. So, but it's really, as my hippie friends would say, it's all fractals. You know, the great outdoors, we have this whole world, but it's like a world within a world. It's kind of wild that we have things are the way that they are. You know, it's cutting edge, and it's interesting. Even I was in college 10 years ago now is when I quit, because it just wasn't giving me what, you know, it just seemed odd.
You quit
know,
what?
College. I went for a while.
College.
Yeah, I only really wanted to go to the biology courses, and I'm like, do I really have to take more math? You know, I've used the Pythagorean formula 0 times since I've graduated. You know?
You know, I want to ask you, I want to figure out together, and for people listening, please put in the comments, there's people who really believe in vegan, like you said. It was, what's that word you used? It was almost religious for you.
Yeah, it's like being devoted to it, as
Yeah.
at least, you know. And then sorry, go.
Oh yeah, so what I was gonna say, but keep that thought. So I was gonna say, so my journey, John, was I read Diet for a New America by John Robbins. He was the heir to the Baskin Robbins family, and he became very vegan, and he convinced me. So that's because of that book, that's why I was vegan. And it didn't work for me. I only lasted a year, and my body type just needs, I guess, heme, iron, and who knows what all the nutrients were that started causing me anxiety and problems in the bathroom, and just not feeling good mentally and physically. I was too tired. I was very fatigued. It just didn't work for me. And I know people will say, well, you need to eat this and eat that and get even more plant-based. But no, I've found so many people on the internet that now are not vegan anymore. It just doesn't last for them. But I have a good friend, Renee. She's vegan, and it's doing well for her. So it depends on the person. But then I found he might be a professor too, Thomas Seyfried, like we mentioned in part 1. And he talks about how cancer is not genetic and ways that you can change it. And then I found people like Dr. David Diamond. He is a neuroscientist, and he was told, oh, you have triglyceridemia and you could die. So he said he read almost 1,000 studies, and it turns out, no, I don't need to take a cholesterol lowering medication. Cholesterol is actually good for you, and it comes to the rescue when your body's being damaged by all the carbs you're eating. So, and then I just interviewed, if you can look below in my show, Dr. Dannenberg. He was given 3 to 6 months to live. He had really scary, incurable bone cancer. And he even mentions at some point he was brushing his teeth and twisted. What were you going to say?
I saw that, or I listened to that interview. That was cool.
And what the part that he didn't say, I read in his blog, it was bad weather. He was in hospice, so he was actually dying. He was in hospice. It was bad weather. His wife had to remove him, and that's when he started eating. For him, and a lot of doctors like him, they need to eat meat. They need to eat fat. They don't believe in the carbs anymore. They really drastically limit their carbs. I don't even know what carbs he eats, but. And then I found Dr. Terry WAHLS. She did a TED Talk called Mighting Your Mitochondria, and she had multiple sclerosis, and she was a plant-based, very healthy vegan. She couldn't figure it out till then. She's in a wheelchair, then she's in bed. She's basically dying. And she basically now has liver once a week. She says no more than 6 to 8 ounces. She says have grass-fed beef every day. I don't know if she has 3 cups, but she has 3 cups of certain things every day. And then Jordan Peterson and his daughter, Michaela Peterson, who just eats steak, and he had depression. since he was 13 and she had all these issues. What were you going to say though?
I followed Jordan Peterson pretty closely, and it's amazing. His daughter was literally falling apart, and that's all it took. And that's just so fascinating. You don't hear this except off of, you know what I mean? My first Google result is not going to provide that to me. You know, it wouldn't be in, say, a nutrition guidelines book that I read in school. And we're so far behind what we're being taught that it's like, here we are, you and I talking, and you could, you know, tell me about Seyfried or something like that. And it's just, boom, there we are. But I almost feel like our education system is holding us back. In all my research, one of the most fascinating people I found in agriculture, and it's just opened my eyes for a lot of stuff, was a guy named John Kempf. And he's of Amish raising, born and raised. And this guy has more scientific literacy than any doctor I've ever come across. 8th grade education, and he's just unbelievably skilled at going through like scientific literature. And maybe we're limiting ourselves just saying that everybody needs to go to college. And I know that's a different conversation, but it's, you know, do I wait 20 years until epigenetics is in the textbook, or can I access it now? I don't know. I digress, but it's interesting.
Well, you know what I'd love if you could text me. You already mentioned 2 or 3 people that you follow, like the Thomas gentleman, because I'd like to put the description for everybody. But then there was also, I interviewed Dr. Ovadia. He was obese, and I forgot his other medical issues. And he wrote a book called Stay Off My Operating Table, which I mentioned in part 1. So I read his book. I read Dr. Dannenberg's book that you can get on the Kindle app. So there's so many doctors that I followed that they had to learn for themselves. They say in medical school, they either had half a day or 3 hours of nutrition training. And that's why a lot of doctors are not healthy, because they don't even think that food affects them. They think you have a medical condition, it's genetic, it's bad luck. You don't need to think about food. Just take this pill, take this surgery, take this shot, and you're going to be fine. And now these doctors are waking up and saying, hey, I'm sick myself. All these things are not working. And some of them were dying, and they had to learn that food might just be healing for them. There's even another guy. Have you ever heard of Andrew Scarborough? I so want to interview him.
No.
He had, I don't think it was glioblastoma multiforme. That's a deadly cancer, but he had some deadly brain cancer. I think the study that he was in, nobody survived except for him. And what he also does is meat-based and fat-based, not plant-based. Interesting.
Yeah, there's these centers, you know, and I think it's very interesting. Then there's all that with like say the whole lectin thing with like beans, and I'm still coming to understand that. I don't eat a ton of legumes as it is, but I grow a ton, but I don't eat a lot of them. But yeah, it's fascinating what we find that is, say, hurting us in the long run. But I guess if you can
share that, if you don't mind, let's see if I can find it. Hold on. I'm going to share something that we were just talking about. No, that's not it. The screen share. I wanted to go over, you know, I need to use my glasses, but we were talking about seeds. A lot of people still don't know that what they're eating, even if it's vegan, very often has these seed oils. Let's see if I can find the article. Oh my gosh, where is it? Is it this one? Oh my gosh, I don't think it is. No, it's not. Oh, here it is. That's why it was hiding. Okay. So can we talk about this, the seed oils?
Yeah, to the best of my understanding, at least the cottonseed, which became extremely popular, was just a byproduct. And then I know, say, was that Dr. Dannenberg that was saying vegetable oil, absolutely do not eat it, don't consume it?
Probably him or Dr. Ovadia, both of them.
Yeah, maybe it was Dr. Ovadia, but that was interesting. I've kind of had that feeling, and when I've eaten it, it's done some terrible things to me. But yeah, a lot of those are just bizarre. Canola wasn't even found in the wild. Like, say, corn came from a grass and was bred through the years. Soy isn't too far off from its natural thing, sunflower. But yeah, a lot of them are just excess things that they then were able to turn into a product, which is, I mean, it's good business, but it's not good to consume.
And the word I heard word is it? I think it's called a trans fat or it's
Yeah.
oxidized. And canola, if you look up canola, how it's made and what it is, I believe it's a yellow weed looking plant, and the little black seeds, look how it's processed. It's too highly processed, as well as cottonseed, where you're really going to go to a farm and say, hey, I think I'm going to eat some cotton seeds or crush it into oil. And grapes
Yeah.
too. You don't usually eat grape seeds.
Bizarre. You could polish furniture with it. That would be safe.
And then the other article I want to show is June of 2020. These the cardiologists, some of them have to do with the dietary guidelines, so they guide the government. They basically did a big oops, and I'm showing this article. It's Saturated Fats and Health, a reassessment and proposal for food-based recommendations. So it's the JACC, Journal American of College of Cardiologists. They basically said, oops, we've been telling you since around probably the 80s that you should have margarine because it's heart healthy, not animal butter. If you eat animal products, you're going to get, God forbid, a heart attack, stroke, colon cancer. And they're just basically saying, oops, we were wrong. You should eat meat. You should eat butter. As a matter of fact, they said it's stroke protective. So if you can find this article, and I'll put it in the description, it turns out that these cardiologists are starting to change what they thought. They're saying now animal products are actually healthy, protects your body. You need it, like John was saying in part one, for your brain. This is what your brain is made out of. So when you eat the animals who are eating the vegan products, they're eating the plants that people like John grow or help grow. And then it gets processed through the four stomachs, and all of a sudden you can eat that protein and benefit. And for some of us, it helps. Like for me, I had anxiety. It's probably depression. And instead of taking a Zocor or what's the other one called? Lexapro, I eat meat. I have to. That's just my body. But I want to know, speaking of farming, what do you think of soy, the plant soy?
The plant soy is weird. So when it was eaten, here, oh, it comes from Japan. It's been used for, however long. But when they eat it, it's almost always fermented. And again, there we got another bacterial process. They're digesting it for you. They are clearing out things that you really shouldn't consume. Like it's kind of fascinating. Like sauerkraut, you can absorb so many more of the nutrients within it because it's already been worked over by the bacteria. So soy, I know it's got phytoestrogens and there's like all this back and forth, but and then you've got memes like people saying soy boys and whatnot, but it was traditionally only used entirely fermented. It was, miso soup and things of that nature, or where they make it into a little bar or whatnot. So that's the plant itself. But then what about the way we raise it? So if I raise it out in the garden, like organically, and then it's pulling all those nutrients and whatnot, and then if I were to ferment that, it's packed full of nutrients and yada, yada. And then hopefully through fermenting it, it will break down some of that phytoestrogen and won't, basically a certain amount, I can't remember exactly, but is the equivalent of a birth control pill worth of hormonal impact on your body. So I would not take a birth control pill personally. So why would I consume that much soy? So that's kind of fascinating. But so the plant's got its own weird little chemical thing going on. But then how I grow it, so if it's GMO soy, you can basically seed a whole field of Roundup Ready soy and then spray it with an herbicide and kill everything but those plants that are genetically modified to stand up to that herbicide. But then you consume that and it's got traces all the way through its makeup. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these herbicides are water soluble. I used to use them at some point. Once upon a time, I worked for a golf course and like I've kind of done it all in that little world and just seen some scary stuff. But it's through that whole plant. You can't wash that off, just as much as like I can't wash the iron out by taking a shower. It's not coming off. It is there in a cellular level. So that spray kills everything in the field, and then I consume it. I'll tell you what, at least as of yet, I'm not genetically modified to be able to withstand that herbicide. So that's some fascinating stuff. And as far as that goes, so soy, unless it's organic, that's the only thing I would toy with, and fermented. So like an organic miso or an organic tempeh, if you really love it, But it's kind of terrifying. And then a lot of people attack that, say the glyphosate, which is a big time herbicide, and they say, oh, it's safe because it acts on something called the shikimate pathway, which is not found in mammals. It basically what works on the plant, and that's kind of bizarre. It actually is probably way too deep for most people's interest, but it makes the plant, like all those weeds except the Roundup Ready version or whatever have you, unable to defend itself from the pathogens, well, the bacteria that turn pathogenic in the soil that'll attack it. So it's kind of wild. So we don't have a shikimate pathway, so they say it is therefore safe for us. We don't have it, but like I was saying before, we have more cells in us that aren't human than are. You know, we have all these bacteria and yeasts and whatnot. They do have a shikimate pathway. So one of these herbicides, glyphosate, is also labeled as a antibiotic. So antibiotic, anti meaning against, bio meaning life. So it's an anti-life, and then I'm ingesting that. Sure, like say if I get a little bit of something on my hands and then that were to soak in or whatever, that's a little bit. But if I were to get that chronically, meaning continuously through my whole life, through my French fries, through everything that's ever been grown in that soil system, you can start to see where it's like a slow drip of poison. You know, sure, it's just a little bit here and there, but you know, times that by, 30 years, or, say some of my loved ones were born with autoimmune dysfunction. And for me, that's what's fascinating, is how much that's linking back, how much we need that microbiome to be. There's some interesting stuff. Again, I'll send you Zach Bush and whatnot, but for babies born by C-section versus by like a natural birth, and the ones naturally birthed are instantly coded and like protected and sent out the door into this big world. But I had my cousin born by C-section, and he suffered. And it's funny because like I always knew this, and blah, 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 it's in the back of your head. And then I'm listening to a talk by Zach Bush, and he was saying their ear infections because they just don't have that membrane. I feel like it should almost be considered in our new understanding of health, like its own organ is basically our ecosystem, our defensive barrier against the world. Like I never got ear infections ever. I think maybe 2, and I was like playing in a swampy pond and I had it coming. But like my cousin was like every week, he ended up getting ear tubes, the whole 9 yards, and like that's not normal. The guy I referenced before, Joel Salatin, he's got a book called That's Not Normal, Folks, or something like that. And it's just how crazy this whole world is. So hold on, voicemail, pardon me, hopefully it comes back up. There we are. But yeah, it's just what we see as normal it's just not, and I'm just piecing it together as you are, and as anyone watching is. We're trying to figure it out, but we have to learn not to take things at face value, because you get to a point and like you'll know something, and I'll go to research it, and I'll get all these bizarre, like really slick websites jump into the top of the search result. And I'm like, I know this, like say if I go to send it to a friend, I know it to be true through, all of medical literature. And I have to like scroll through, I'm like junk, Wikipedia, junk. It's like, I don't know, this world, we need to develop some skepticism, some healthy skepticism, and little bit of informational literacy.
I think we have about 3 more minutes left, so we don't go too long on the video and the interview. But what I was going to say is, if you haven't looked up Dr. Gary Fettke yet, Fettke, and
Right.
he basically was attacked by Nestle and Kellogg's and the Market and Grocer Association. Eventually people started apologizing to him, but I think he had 2 or 3 years of suffering, because all he is an orthopedic surgeon in Australia. And he was just telling his patients, 90% of my knee replacements are obese and 70% are obese of my hip replacements. So he started to say, you need to eat keto. He recommended keto, maybe even carnivore. I'm not sure, that you need to eat a certain way so that I can see you, because he didn't want to do surgery on them knowing they're going to have the same problem of inflammation. And he would get in trouble because all of a sudden the hospitals, the doctors are not making money. And all of a sudden the whole supermarket, there's a whole variety of boxed and bags foods that they can't eat. So that's why Kellogg's and Nestle went after him. And he said in an interview, I guess I'm stubborn because he just wouldn't stop telling people this message. And they tried to say to him, you're an orthopedic surgeon, not a nutritionist, so you can't talk about food.
Yeah, right. Like I can't talk about food because it's written on the wall. It's kind of obvious, a lot of these things.
So in the last 2 minutes, can you tell us a little bit more about soy health and what do you do for people over the phone, over video, and you can travel to them if they want to hire you?
Soil health, not soy health. That's almost anti. So I love talking about this stuff, and my focus is regenerating health and regenerating ecosystem. And how do you do that? But by regenerative agriculture. So it's kind of those whole things. And part of that is where you can, say, around your home, native plants and whatnot, and reestablishing, like I said, with the microbes. You can do something, you can do so much. Say I was talking about that little sample from a healthy forest, you're bringing it back, you do something like a compost tea, and you're bringing that life back in. So that's essentially what I do for a living, and it's a beautiful thing, you know. And then there's the nuts and bolts we do, you know, planting seeds and whatnot, but a lot is just like this, talking about it, getting it out there, and specific little steps you can do. So
beautiful. And my information is also in the description. I help people, I use hypnotherapy to help people relax and change some behaviors and thoughts, because we all have that from our upbringing. And then I help with nutrition tips as well, because I'm on a journey, and it really helped me, you know, learning what John knows. I mean, that's how I found John. It was in YouTube comments. He was just commenting. I said, oh my gosh, I'd love to talk to you. You know so much. So anything else you want to say, John, before? I think we have about 30 seconds left.
that's all. I just be well out there, everybody. And it's been good talking to you, Amalia.
Thank you. You too, John. And you can reach out to me, growthfactor.org or growthfactor.org@gmail.com. And we'll put everything in the description, how you can reach us both. And everyone, thank you for listening.
Bye.